So again, welcome and thank you for joining, taking your precious time. And again, as usual, we will start with the motivations, trying to start with right and good motivations. And before that, we'll try to quiet our mind, calm our mind by watching the breath for a few moments. Then we can try to reflect, contemplate, and think that may us coming here together and discussing and studying, learning, may it all become cause and conditions to reduce and gradually to eliminate all the afflictive emotions, and especially the very root of all those afflictive emotions, the fundamental ignorance, which are the very cause of our unhappiness, our pain and suffering. And may it become cause and conditions to actualize all the positive state of mind, such as loving kindness, compassion, the awakening mind, and the wisdom, especially the wisdom realizing the ultimate truth or nature of phenomena, which are the cause and condition for our inner peace and ultimate happiness, and as well as cause to bring peace and ultimate happiness in the life of all other sentient beings. And may our act of studying, practice, contemplation, meditation become cause and condition to obtain fully enlightened state, so we can be most help and benefit to all sentient beings, including oneself. Okay. So, to the founder, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond the four destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect knowledge, and it would conduct Sugata, knower of the world, supreme guide of human beings to be tamed, treasure of God and human beings, to you, the completely and fully awakened one, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shakya clan, I prostrate, make offering, and go for refuge. Homage to the Supreme Buddha, homage to the Dhamma refuge, homage to the great Sangha, to all three, devout homage. To all worthy of respect, bowing with bodies as many as all realms, atoms in all aspects, with a supreme faith, I pay homage. Do not commit any non-virtuous action, perform only perfect virtuous actions, subdue your mind thoroughly. This is the teaching of Buddha, a star, a visual apparitions, a flame of a lamp, in illusions, a drop of dew, or a bubble, a dream, a flash of lightning, a cloud, see condition things as such. Through this merit, may sentient beings attain the rank of all-seeing, subdue the fault, and deliver from samsara's oceans, perturbed by the wave of aging, sickness, and death. I prostrate to the Arya table gem. Thus did I hear one time the Bhagavan was dwelling on the mass of vultures mountain in Rasgaya together with the great community of monks and great community of bodhisattvas. At that time, the Bhagavan observed in the concentration on the category of phenomena called profound perceptions. Also at that time, the bodhisattva, mahasattva, Arya Avalokiteshvara looked upon the very practice of profound perfection of wisdom and beheld those five aggregate also as empty of inherent nature. Then through the power of the Buddha, the Venerable Shariputra said this to Bodhisattva Master Arya Avalokiteshvara: how should any son of the lineage train who wish to practice the activities of profound perfection and wisdom? He said that, and the Bodhisattva Master Arya Avalokiteshvara said this to the Venerable Shariputra: Shariputra, any son of the lineage or daughter of the lineage who wish to practice the activity of profound perfection and wisdom should look upon it like this, correctly and repeatedly beholding those five aggregate also as empty of inherent nature. Form is empty, emptiness form. Emptiness not other than form. Form is also not other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, discrimination, compositional factor, and consciousness are empty. Shariputra, likewise, all phenomena are emptiness without characteristic, unproduced, unstainless, not without stain, not deficient, and not fulfilled. Shariputra, therefore, in emptiness, there is no form, no feeling, no discrimination, no compositional factor, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no visual form, no sound, no order, no taste, no object of touch, and no phenomena. There's no eye element, and so on, up to and including no mind element and no mental consciousness element. There's no ignorance, no extinction with ignorance, and so on, up to and including no aging and death, and no extinction with aging and death. Similarly, there's no suffering, origination, cessation, and path. There is no exalted wisdom, no attainment, also no non-attainment. Shariputra, therefore, because there is no attainment, bodhisattvas rely on dwelling the perfection of wisdom, the mind without obscuration and without fear. Having completely passed beyond era, they reach the end point of nirvana. All the Buddhas who dwell in Thubten also manifest they completely awakened and unsurprised for perfect, complete enlightenment in reliance on perfection and wisdom. Therefore, the mantra of perfection and wisdom, the mantra of great knowledge, the unsurprised mantra, the mantra equal to the unequal, the mantra that truly pacifies all suffering should be known as truth, since it is not false. The mantra of perfection and wisdom declare, Tayatha om gade gade, paragate, parasam gade, bodhi soha. Shariputra, the Bodhisattva master, should train in the profound perfection of wisdom like that. Then the Bhagavan arose from the concentration and commanded the Bodhisattva master, Arya Avalokiteshvara, saying, well said, son of the lineage, it is like that, it is like that. One should practice the profound perfection of wisdom just as you have indicated. Even Tathagatas rejoiced. The Bhagavan, having thus spoken, the Venerable Shariputra, the Bodhisattva master, Arya Avalokiteshvara, and those surrounding the entire along the world of the gods, humans, asuras, and Gandharvas are overjoyed and highly praised. That is spoken by the Bhagavan. We can go for the, yeah. 사시베 예종심에 도다레라렌시 니데게 반데 상계신도 미데우와이 도근 나마다신 Je tam guru ranam I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create to listen to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient. Sangye chodan soge sonam la chanchu patudan. Dagi shoshe gibe sonam ge dola penje sangye duba. Sangye chodan soge sonam la chanchu patudan. Dagi shoshe gibe sonam ge dola penje sangye duba. Sure. So we have been going through the Je Tsongkhapa's middle lamrim, or the stages of path to enlightenment, and within that there is a in terms of the actual practice. Within the actual practice, there is a practice of initial scope practice and middle scope practice and high scope practice, and then we have finished the practice of high scope, and within that, the practice of 6 perfections, the practice of 6 paramita of perfections, and then having finished that in Je Tsongkhapa, go more details on the last two paramita of perfection, the perfection of shamatha or meditative concentrations, and the practice of wisdom. And we have completed the practice of the karma abiding with shamatha, and then we are in the practice of the wisdom, realizing the ultimate reality, truth, or emptiness, however we call it. And in order to understand and have the realization of emptiness, of course, we need to study, reflect, contemplate, and meditate. And we meditate here by using analysis. When we do the meditative concentration on karma abiding, we don't use any analysis. We try to just concentrate on the objects by stopping all other analytical thoughts. Here we actually use, analyze to investigate and analyze what's the reality of self and other phenomena. What's the true nature of self and other phenomena. And through that, by using such investigation, examination, analysis, then we come to understanding of deeper understanding of what is the true nature of self and other phenomena. And within that, we Je Tsongkhapa presenting the selfness of the person and selfness of phenomena, and then that we are in the selfness of phenomena. Within the selfness of phenomena, then the presentation of the selfnesses of compounded phenomena and uncompounded phenomena. And so we are in the presentation of the selflessness or the emptiness of compounded phenomena. And within that, Je Tsongkhapa saying, we can use the same analysis investigation that we have used that when he presented the certain person, but also here he's presenting a special another logical or analysis of dependent arisings, by using dependent arisings as a way of analyzing the true nature of phenomena. So, and within that, I think we are on I don't know at page number.
I think it's Geshe, it's page 250 of the text, or that's 254 of the PDF.
Okay.
How
50,
the it's 250 of the text, which is page 254 of the PDF.
yeah, 250, yeah. And I think within that, I think we just finish. I think we are on where it says how the two extremes are simultaneously eliminated through the reasoning of dependent arising.
Yeah.
I think we are there in terms of if you in terms of the outlines, immediate outlines. So when you use a logical kind of way of analyzing things, such as the phenomena, is when you use the phenomena, compounding phenomena are empty of inherent existence because it's dependent arisings. Okay, because it's dependent arising. So dependent arising is the logical point, or logical, and that the phenomena are the objects, compounded phenomena here, objects, and the thesis is that is non-hidden existence. So when you use that kind of reason, then with that logic, then it says it clear both the extreme by that logic, because of thesis. When you say it is non-inherent existent, then it clear the extreme of permanence that is grasping truly existence or inherent existence. And because of the logic that is dependent arising, therefore it clear the extreme of nihilism or annihilations, that thing does not exist. So with that logic, then it clear both extremes simultaneously. Not only that, even the term dependent arising, as one of the masters says, even the just term here, of course, the explanation is that the logic, which is dependent arising, clear the extreme of nihilism, and the thesis that is non-inherently existent clears the extreme of superimpositions, superimposing or permanence. But as one of the master food, even just the logic itself of dependent arising, just by that self, it clears both extremes. And when you say dependent arising, there's two words, depending and arisings. Okay? So when the word said depending, then it clears the objects is not independent. Okay? And so non-independent, so independent and inherent existing have the same meaning here. They are synonymous. So it's because it's dependent, therefore it's not independent. Therefore it's not inherent existence. Therefore that when we use dependent arising, that depending, that term, clear, when you have that understanding of that term, when you use dependent arising, when you have correct and unmistaken understanding of that, then it clears the extreme of grasping the object to be inherently or independent existence. So that is extreme. Then arising, meaning something being produced, coming into existence, or arisings. And so when you say that it is dependent arising, that means some whatever that object is coming into existence or being produced or arising and therefore it clear the extreme that nothing exists, the nihilism, or any lihations, or, so that extreme. So therefore, just by when you understand the term dependent arising, just by that term, understanding of that term correctly, it clear both extreme. So it is so powerful that when you have correct understanding of that, then it clears both extremes simultaneously. So yeah, so I think that is so basically that is here of course Lama Tsongkhapa explaining by using this let's say the computer is non-infinitely existing because it's dependent arisings. So like logic that. And so therefore the thesis and the logical proof, each of them clearing two of the extremes. But again, as one of the masters says, even just the term dependent arising can clear both extremes simultaneously. So I think that is why this logic of dependent arising is so powerful, to have the correct understanding middle way by clearing the two extremes and finding the middle way. Then the next, presentation of dependent arising, and which is the and which is similar or common, shared with the Mind Holy School, Siddhamatran. Therefore, external things such as sprout, and internal things such as compositional factors. So the compositional factor here, karma, compositional factor or compositional actions or karma, originate depending on seed and so forth. So the sprout is dependent on each cause. What is the each cause? It's the seed. Okay, the seed is the cause of the sprout. So sprout is dependent on its seed and many other conditions. So that is dependent arising from the cause and conditions. In terms of internal things such as karma or compositional factor or action, whatever you call it, it is dependent on ignorance. The karma arises when we talk about 12 link. The ignorance is the first link, and compositional actions or karma is the second link. And that compositional factor karma arises due to the fundamental ignorance. So it's dependent on the ignorance. Here, karma, meaning contaminated actions, contaminated karma. So that is dependent on the such as the fundamental ignorance, respectfully. So here, the understanding of dependent arising in the term of depending on its cause and conditions, whether it's external phenomena or internal phenomena, they depend on its cause and conditions. That understanding of dependent arising common to all the Buddhist school of thought. That understanding is common. All the Buddhist school of thought, except dependent arising. All the 4 different Buddhist school of thought, they all have understanding of dependent arising. All the conditioned phenomena or compounded phenomena are dependent arisings. They all have same understanding in that. And they all says it is dependent arising because it depends on its cause and conditions. Okay? So that there's no argument among the different school of thoughts. They all have common understanding of that, common view on that. They all have understanding dependent arising, but when they say dependent arising, what is commonly shared is among the compounded phenomena or conditioned phenomena, they depend on its cause and conditions. So that is the share. Okay. Then, which is not common to some of the schools, uncommon of the Madhyamika. Here it says, if that is so, they're established through their own character. Illogical, because they are established through their own entity. They would necessarily be established for themselves through their own power, self-sustaining inherent existence. So their dependence on cause and condition would be contradictory. So from the Prasangika or Madhyamika point of view, then they're saying, to the other schools, what you are saying is you are contradicting yourself. Now, Madhyamika is saying to them, on one hand, you say all compounded phenomena exist by its own nature or by its own inherent existence. On the other hand, you said there are dependent arisings. Okay? You said they are dependent arising. At the same time, you said they are existing by its own side, by its own nature or inherent existence. That is what other Buddhist school says. So Madhyamika is saying that is contradictions. The Madhyamika is saying what you are saying, your view is contradictions. If something is dependent by its own side, by its own nature, inherently, it can't be dependent on something. And so therefore, for you to say it is dependent arising, at the same time say that is contradiction. So that is and from the, therefore, from the Madhyamika point of view, because it is dependent arising, therefore is non-inherent existing. Therefore is not existing from its own side, by its own nature. Can you see the differences? Yeah, I think it is if you don't understand that, then understanding of dependent arising become very gross. Okay, well, even the others, some of the Buddhist schools, even though they have, understanding of depending on its cause and condition, but they don't have the understanding of emptiness, because they don't have understanding of dependent arising in subtle way. Their understanding of dependent arising very gross. And that understanding of dependent arising on the gross level cannot destroy the subtle ignorance. That kind of dependent arising can help to overcome the grasping of permanent, or the grasping of that things does not exist, or the thing exists causelessly, without cause, but it will not be able to destroy the subtle ignorance. And so therefore, the understanding of the subtle dependent arising is necessary to have a correct understanding of the emptiness, and thereby to be able to destroy the very subtle ignorance, the fundamental subtle ignorance. And so therefore and to that, in terms of quotation, then, in the 400th stanza, Arya Dev, Arya Deva, the main disciple of Je Tsongkhapa, Nagarjuna, he said, that which has dependent origin does not have its independence. So because dependent origination, independence are contradiction, they are opposite. All those, so therefore all these don't have independence. All the phenomena, self and other phenomena, do not have independent existence. Hence, the self does not exist. Therefore, self does not exist from its own nature, by its own nature, by its own side, because it depends on other cause and conditions, other factors. So here then, dependent arising, here again, Lama Tsongkhapa explaining, not only it depends on cause and conditions, then it goes a little further, that it depends on its collections, its parts, whatever phenomena that is. Every phenomena has its parts that make the wholeness. And so therefore, each of that whole make not only it depends on its parts. So therefore, through this you should understand, since persons and the parts are like that, also imputing relies on their own collections of parts. They do not have inherent established. These are two presentations of logical proof dependent arising. So here Lama Tsongkhapa explaining there are two ways of understanding dependent arising. One is dependent arising is cause and conditions. That is common to all the Buddhist school of thought. And then is one dependent arising depending on its parts. Okay. And that one is not that is not the view of all the Buddhist school of thought. Some of the Buddhist school of thoughts, they have this they have view there is something that is partless. So if you go to the very subtle, that makes the matters. You go. I think maybe in the science, maybe they are trying to find something like what they call the God matter or something. Which is the very basic of everything, so subtle from where it comes, everything. So in that, in some other like Bhavasika and so Tantrika, they think that there is a, in particles, you can go smaller, that you cannot anymore break into part anymore. You cannot break anymore into pieces anymore. And that is partless. They believe that is partless, and that is the basis for all other particles, the matters. It is so. Therefore, they have this concept of partless particles. Okay. And whereas Madhyamika and Minor Holy School refute that. Even though it is so small, you cannot break into part, but still it has its part, the part of directional. And if there is no part of directional, then many particles coming together cannot make many of those partless particles coming together create a growth matters. So we don't have to go in details, but definitely. So therefore, but from Madhyamika point of view, all phenomena have parts. There is no phenomena that is partless. Whether it is external phenomena or whether it is internal phenomena, such as consciousness and mind. Even the consciousness of mind, there isn't any consciousness of mind that is partless. And there isn't any external matters that is partless. So everything has its parts. Every phenomena is part. Because every phenomena is its parts, therefore every phenomena depend on its parts. By depending on its parts, then it becomes the wholeness of that, whatever you call it. As a persons, we depend on our aggregates. That is our parts. As a computer, it depends on its screen, its all the engines and all that, and so it depends on its parts. So that is, and then and that one is again shared by both Madhyamika and the Siddhamadharan, or the school, the Minor Holy School and Middle Holy School. They also share that one. They have same understanding of that. Okay. Again, maybe I don't know. It might become a little bit kind of what do you call little bit kind of technical and kind of intellectual academic, but to all this differentiating, but sometimes it is helpful to understand. When we understand that, we begin to understand how subtle difference each of them have. And when you have that, then you have to have better understanding of the Madhyamika view correctly, because sometimes the difference are very subtle, and so from the Madhyamika, point of view and the mind-only school of point of view, all conditioned phenomena are dependent on its cause and conditions. All conditioned phenomena or all compounded phenomena are dependent on its cause and condition as well as its parts. But uncompounded phenomena, unconditioned phenomena are dependent on its parts, but it's not dependent on its cause and conditions. So there is slightly different. So when we say it's dependent on cause and conditions, then it doesn't cover whole phenomena. It only covers some part of the phenomena. And when we say it's dependent on its part, then it covers all the phenomena. Do you get it? So maybe if you have any question, maybe we can come later. So when we say is it dependent on, if the phenomena are dependent arising only from the cause and conditions, then it only covers certain phenomena, that is conditioned phenomena. All conditioned phenomena depend on its cause and condition. But from Buddhist point of view, there are also uncompounded or unconditioned phenomena as well. It will come later. And those phenomena doesn't depend on its cause and conditions. But then how is it dependent arising? If it doesn't depend on cause and condition, how is it dependent arising? And is it dependent arising because it depends on its parts? So conditioned phenomena, they are dependent on cause condition as well as dependent on its parts. Unconditioned phenomena, they are not dependent on its cause and condition, but it depends on its parts. Yeah? Do you get it? Or am I clear? Am I confusing you more? Maybe if you have any kind of not clear, maybe you can ask me later, as well as maybe you can have in discussions, maybe to clear that a little bit. And I think Bob might be able, Bob will be able to help that in your discussions, to be able to go a little bit more detail on that, and then Prasangika point of view, the most subtle dependent arising now, that is not being explained by the mind-only school or Sautandrika Madhyamika, is that, there's a dependent arising, mutual dependent arising. Mutual dependent arisings. And that is, most subtle, and that is unique of Prasangika, mutual dependent arisings. And mutual dependent arising, just to give one example of the subject, the mind, and the object of that subject. Let's say my eye consciousness, so the subject eye consciousness, the object of that eye consciousness that is perceiving the computer here now. The computer, the object, my eye consciousness that is perceiving the computer is the subject, the consciousness. Of course, there's one explanation that the computer is dependent on its cause and conditions, also is dependent on its parts. Same with my eye consciousness, is dependent on its preceding cause and conditions as well as its parts. That is common to mind-only school and Prasangika and Sautandrika Madhyamika. But one uncommon. The Prasangika is not only that, is mutually dependent arising, So because there's an object, there is subject that is perceiving the object. Because there is a subject that is perceiving the object, therefore there is the object. So here, why it is important? Because some other schools, let's say, how do we establish any object to exist. How can we establish an object exists or not exist? So all the Buddhist school of thoughts will say, if there is a valid cognition that is perceiving the objects, then we can establish that object exists. If there's no valid cognition that's perceiving the object, then you cannot establish that object exists. And that is kind of common to all the Buddhist school of thoughts. So then the problem comes, then, okay, we can see how the object can be established existing because there's a subject, the valid cognizer which perceives that. But to prove that, you have to prove that the subject exists. The subject that is perceiving, the conscious that is perceiving object. You have to establish that exists. How do you establish that exists? And that is where different school of thoughts come with different ideas, different views. You know, some of the school will come, there is another conscious that's perceiving that consciousness. Okay, because there is another valid cognizer that is perceiving that I consciousness, that is perceiving the computer. And then it goes, another consciousness perceiving that and endlessly. And some of the schools, such as, some of the schools refute that, then it becomes endless. You need another consciousness to perceive that, establish that existing, another, and so it is endless. Therefore, you cannot actually prove that the first object exists because it is endless. Therefore, they come with this idea, so-called Rangrik is self-cognizer. You know, self-cognizer is the moment you perceive the object simultaneously, the consciousness perceives consciousness itself. There's this so-called Rangri or self-cognizer that perceives simultaneously as so. Then you have a consciousness that perceives the objects, and there is consciousness that perceives the subjects simultaneously. That is what they call Rangri or self-cognizer. And again, Madhyamika, Prasanga Madhyamika even refute that, and then you don't need another cognizers, different cognizer to perceive that cognizer. Neither you need a set cognizer to cognize the consciousness to prove that it exists. You can say you can prove the consciousness exists, the subject consciousness exists by the object. It cannot be a consciousness perceiving the object if there is no object. My eye consciousness that is perceiving the computer cannot be consciousness that perceiving the computer if there's no computer. Do you get it? So just by having the computer, then you can prove that there is a consciousness that is perceiving the computer. So Prasangya is saying you don't need to make very complicating. On other hand, the object can be established existence because there is subject that is perceiving that. So that is mutual dependent. Because there is object, there is a subject that is perceiving object. Because there is a perceiving subject that is perceiving object, therefore there is object. Do you get it? So it's mutually dependent arising. When one of them is not, when one doesn't exist, then it collapses the others. When there is no computer, then there is no eye consciousness that's perceiving the computer. When there is no eye consciousness that's perceiving the computer, there is no more computer. Do you get it? How they are dependent on each others? mutually depending on each other. And then that is same, the concept here and there. There is only concept here because there is there. If there's no there, there's no concept here. There wouldn't be concept here if there is no there. They are mutually dependent arisings, small and big, good and bad, moral, immoral, samsara, nirvana. All the phenomena, are mutually dependent arisings. And so that is kind of unique or prasangika point of view, that the presentations, that how everything is mutually dependent arising. So and then I think when we have that understanding of mutually dependent arising, then I think it can help us, because at the moment when we don't have that understanding, we have these fixations, fixed idea that everything exists from its own side without depending on this side, because we are saying here mutually dependent. So when something that is mutually dependent, when other object does not exist, that object cannot exist. But at the moment, we don't see that way. We see whatever object it appears, whether it is the external object, whether it is the internal object, as though it exists by its own, without depending on others, by its own power, from its own side, by its own nature. Don't we? I don't know. For me, it appeared like that. Maybe those who have realization, maybe it might not appear that way, but or maybe we might have unless we have a different appearance. But to me, whatever object, whether it's external, internal, everything exists by its own, from its own nature, by its own power, on its own side. When I say computer, it doesn't appear that actually it depends on my consciousness. That's consciousness, or it depends on the consciousness that perceiving the computer. It appears regardless whether there is a consciousness, biological cognitive perceiving computer or not, the computer existing from its own side. It doesn't. Do you get it? It doesn't appear that the biological cognition need to be there, that it perceive computer to establish that exists. When I see computer, there is no appearance of that computer depending on the consciousness. Once we understand that consciousness dependent arising, therefore that computer to exist, it has to depend on the consciousness that precedes that. Then you see the dependent arising. So then you see it's not existing by its own power, from its own entity, from its own side, by its own nature. So it goes much more deeper than the other two explanations of the dependent arising. It goes much more subtle. So another way of understanding, how dependent arising, how all phenomena on the dependent on its basis, how every phenomenon exists by depending on how it exists by imputed or designated or labeled by the concept or the mind name, how everything merely exists by the label, how everything exists merely by the thoughts and concepts. So when we understand that, then again, there's no object to really hold or grasp the object, to hold so tightly and so solidly as we hold. Mm. So by depending on the, so I think maybe that will be okay in terms of dependent arisings. I think last one is a little bit more difficult to understand, and that is why, normally it's easy for us to understand dependent arising in terms of cause and conditions, especially with the conditioned phenomena. And I think sometimes some teachers only explain on that from that perspective, because it's easy for people to understand. But just that understanding will not lead to actually the realization of emptiness itself, the subtle emptiness, That understanding of dependent arising, I think, to some degree, I think even the animals have understanding of that. They might not be able to use the term, but in terms of the meaning, they understand that. For example, if they eat something, they know they will get sick. That is understanding of dependent arising on the cause and condition to a certain degree. They might not be able to explain in the term of language, but in meaning they understand that that plant or that food will make them sick. So they try to avoid that. And they see this plant will heal them when they are sick. So when they are sick, they are not feeling, they go and try to find that plant because they know that they can heal them. So cause and condition, they understand that cause and conditions to a certain degree. So they understand cause and condition, even whether they are able to explain language-wise or not. So that, might not be extremely difficult to understand depending on cause conditions, that interdependent or dependent arise in terms of cause and conditions. But it's much more difficult to understand the dependent arising in terms of depending on its parts, depending on its mutual dependence, or depending on the mind, the subjects. So I think that is. So I think that is important to understand dependent arising from all these many different levels, and understanding from more gross to more subtle level, gross to more subtle levels. We start with the gross level, and then we try to understand more subtle levels. So that is where it's, if something arises dependently and is imputed dependently, it does not. So here, if something arises dependently, that is referring to the arising or existence or coming into existence by depending on its cause and conditions. And then is imputed dependently. So then, something, an object that is being imputed, in terms of by depending on its parts or its designations or the basis of that objects, then imputing, so that those are two kind of different level of dependent arising. Whatever, whether it or both of them, it does not, if something that is imputed or arises dependently, then that cannot be something that can be exist by its own side, established by its own side, by its own nature, And if that is so, then it cannot be its own entity, cannot be one with whatever it depends on, And that logic we already kind of Je Tsongkhapa already explained before, that how the person is neither one inherently, neither one with aggregate, or neither is different or separate from the aggregates. And so again, is kind of, again, same, that is what it is. Indeed, as one is what, so just like person, then it applies to all the phenomena, because all the phenomena are imputed by depending on its basis. So whether the imputed phenomena is one with the basis, or whether it is separate from the basis, to which is imputed. So that therefore one with whatever it depends on, or if it exists as a one inherently or truly, all actions and agent wouldn't be one, because then you wouldn't be able to differentiate, two different subjects, the subject, the agent, and the actions that is being done, that because they are inherently one, inherently existing one. And so if it exists as one, then it cannot, to the mind, it cannot appear differently. It has to be same. If it's inherently one, then also to the mind, it will have to appear one. But to our mind, it doesn't appear one. To our mind, we have appeared there is agency. To our conventional violet cognition, there is a subject, the agent, and then that subject or agent, the person creating the actions, engaging the action, two separate, the action and the persons, the action agencies. But if they are inherently existing one, that cannot be differentiated. And so the action, as Nagarjuna explained, the actions and the agent will be one. The experience and the person who is experienced will be one. The result and the person who is experiencing the result will be same. So there will be too many problems that. And then secondly, the two also do not exist differently, inherently different or separate by established by its own identity or by its inherently. Because if they are inherently, or by its own power, by its own nature, different and separate, one could refute their relation, so the dependent would contradict it. So then, if that's the case, then you cannot say, they are related, because they are inherently separate and different. So if they are inherently separate, and so they are not dependent, then they become independent. And something, two objects, two things that is independent, then you cannot say their relationship. If they have some relationship, if they have connected, then it means they have they are dependent on each others or dependent on others. So therefore, and so if that's the case, then, in terms of persons, if our aggregates and the person ourselves is inherently different and not independent, then, when something happened to your aggregate body, when you get a wound, pain in your body, you wouldn't feel the pain. If your mind is disturbed, you wouldn't be disturbed. If your mind is happy, you wouldn't be happy, because your mind, the aggregate, and you are completely separate, unrelated. And same with our physical. When your body is healthy, then you wouldn't say I'm healthy, or you wouldn't feel you are healthy, because your body and yourself, your aggregate of your body and you are completely separate, completely unrelated. If it is in here, so that is, and we can apply that to all the objects, all the objects, and so that is because something that is dependent on something, and then independent will be contradicted. So then in Nagarjuna, root of type wisdom, whatever arises, depending on something, is not that thing for a while. Neither is not one with that object. Neither is other than that. Neither is separate from that object inherently. Hence, is not so, because they are not So because they are not one with the objects, because they are dependent on others, because they are not inherently one with the objects, and because neither they are inherently separate, therefore, it is free from the two extremes, the extreme of annihilated, or permanent, so it's free from that, and you find the middle way. And also, praise to the transcendental one by Nagarjuna himself. Logician assert that suffering is created by itself or others. So here, he refute in his by different schools that some of them say our sufferings is created by itself. Some says it is created by others. Some says is created by both or neither, and some says it is created without any cause. And so all these four are reputed. And so that is where it says created by itself or others. So one, itself is one, others two, or by both, or neither of them, others mean neither of them, or that is without cause. So there are four different views that has been refuted. And Nagarjuna is saying that such view are being refuted is not created by him, it is said by the Buddha. So therefore he says, you said, referring to the Buddha, you said that it arises dependently, your sufferings, your happiness, our experience, all phenomena. You said, they arise, they originated by depending on others. That which arises in interdependence on cause conditions, is parts and consciousness, is asserted by you as emptiness. So you have explained, Nagarjuna saying, hey, Buddha, you have explained whatever is dependent arising is emptiness or empty. Whatever is empty is dependent arising. So you have explained that, unlike like others' views, such as those four different views. And so therefore, things do not exist independently. And you have asserted that things do not exist independently. And that is your matchless line roar, And so he's saying that is something no other teachers has explained in the past. That view has never been explored by other teachers in the past. It's only you who have explained and explored that nothing exists independently. Therefore, all phenomena are empty of independent existence. All phenomena are therefore all phenomena are empty of inherent existence. Therefore, all phenomena are empty of. So therefore, again, we try to remember when we hear the word emptiness, we are not talking about nothingness. Okay? Because a lot of time when we talk about emptiness or when we try to do meditation on emptiness, where we think there is nothingness, there's nothing. We reject all existence of anything. Here is saying that is wrong because the Buddha explained the meaning of emptiness from the point of view of dependent arisings. It is empty because it is dependent arisings. If it's nothingness, then there is no need to be a dependent arising. Do you get it? When we say dependent arising, it means it's dependent on certain other things, factors, existing by depending on other factors. There's no need to say that if nothing exists. You just said there is nothing. You don't have to say they are dependent arising. The very reason Buddha explained is a dependent arising means there is something there. So what it reject and what it refute is independent on inherent existence by the reasoning of the dependent arisings. And as already mentioned before, not only by the reason of not only by the reasoning of dependent arisings that it explain or establish empty, but the meaning of emptiness is dependent arising. The meaning of dependent arising is emptiness. So we should understand that they are not contradiction, but they are actually, and not only they are not contradiction, they complement each other, they support each other. Not only they complement and support each other, but actually the meaning of emptiness, dependent arising, the meaning of dependent arising, emptiness. When we have that understanding, then there's no, and when we have understanding of dependent arising from the subtle point of view, then there is no danger to fall in any of the extreme, any of the two extreme. There's no danger to fall in any. When you don't understand that, then there is danger to fall in. When you, even you understand dependent arising, but if you understand dependent arising as a separate from the emptiness, then there could be a danger of falling into extreme. Do you get it? So you accept and you have understand dependent arising, but if you understand dependent arising something as emptiness, emptiness something as dependent arising, then you can still fall in when you. But when you understand dependent arising as a meaning of emptiness or dependent arising, then there is no danger of falling into the extreme. Okay. So the Je Tsongkhapa just explained through the logical proof or reasoning or dependent arising, apprehensions, misapprehension, apprehension, oneness and different, inherently oneness different. So that has been refuted, negated, and of the extreme of permanent and annihilations, so to two extreme also been clear and the four extreme of origination. So the four extreme just explain, depending on itself and others, or both or neither of them, and depending on without arising without depending on the cause. So those are the four extreme of originations, are thus said to be refuted. So to this reasoning, I think again here Je Tsongkhapa doesn't go much. But if you are interested, the refutation of the four extreme of originations, you can find in Nagarjuna's Precious Garland. He refuting this, the four. Some of them where it says, your experience, you experience without depending on cause. Some of them saying, it experienced by depending on itself, coming from itself, and that is some of the non-Buddhist school of thoughts, coming from causeless, without cause is another, some of the earlier school of thought, some of the school of thought, non-Buddhist, and then some of them coming by itself, another school of thought, and then others is, some of the non-Buddhist as well as some of the Buddhist school of thoughts. Here others means, depending on inherently existing others, So that is where the problem comes with some of the other, even within the Buddhist school of thought, as it is mentioned, how it contradicts, for example, and not only Buddhist school of thought, our mind is just like that, okay? They accept dependent arisings, and we accept dependent arisings. We see clearly how the plant grows and is dependent on its seeds and the waters and fertilizers and light, all of that. We see that and we understand that dependent arising that. And so same, the other Buddhist school of thought, also they are much more brighter than us, They are much more intelligent than us, those great masters and scholars. They also understand that. But the problem is they think, there's inherently existing seed that is producing inherently existing plant. From Prasangya point of view, that is a contradiction. For them, they don't see that contradictions. So while they see the seed producing the plant, the sprout and plant, at the same time, they still have grasping of that seed inherently and the plant inherently. And that is also what we do. Don't you? At least my mind does that. While I see the seed producing the plant, at the same time, I see the seed as inherently by its own side, by its own nature. And also I see the plant existing from its own side, by its own nature. So our understanding of dependent arising is very gross. We haven't understood the subtle level of dependent arising. Therefore, we cannot overcome the ignorance that is grasping inherently existence. That is why it's so important to have a understand dependent arising on that level. Yeah. So you can see why some of the Buddhist schools, such as Babasika and Sotandirika, even though they say it's dependent arising, while at the same time they are grasping inherently existence, and they say inherently existence. And at the very beginning, we think, oh, how can that be? Don't we feel, how can that be? How can they be so stupid? How can they have that contradictions? But check our mind. Check our mind. Don't we also grasp that way? Check. It's very clear. We know that, apple trees come from the seed, and we see that cause and conditions. That apple plant is dependent on its seed and other conditions. So we see that we understand depending on cause and conditions. At the same time, we grasp that seed to be inherently, and the apple tree to be inherently, the apple to be inherently, the apples, the flower to be inherently, That is because we do have understand dependent arising, but very gross level, very gross level. It's not understanding on subtle level. And therefore, when you don't have that understanding subtle level, it will destroy some of the gross level of ignorance, but it will not be able to destroy the subtle level of ignorance. So I wanted to kind of clear that, because, sometimes we can have, we can see how some of the Buddhist school of thought, while they accept dependent arising, how can they be kind of confused or contradictions in that way, But if we actually apply our own experience, then we can see how that can be confused, and because how that, because that is also our experience. That is also our experience. So I was talking about, because I was talking about these 4 extreme originations, and then I was talking about the others, because here 4 extreme, it explained without depending on cause, and with coming depending by itself, arising by itself and arising by others. So that is where others, inherently exist in other cause and conditions, and then neither of them or either of them, So when each of them will be refuted, then both of them can be refuted, and neither of them. So that is Nagarjuna's Precious Garland, and then also if you read Je Tsongkhapa's the Great Lamrim, this is Middle Lamrim, so Great Lamrim, he also go in that more details, okay? And then, of course, those who have Geshe Soba's commentary, then I'm sure I haven't read it myself, but I've heard from everyone who have read. It's a great commentaries, and should be, because he's one of the greatest scholar of his time. And I heard that the whole text was taught over 20 years. So he goes very details, that is why it took 20 years. For us now, if it takes 2 years, we feel, but he taught that text for 20 years. And so after, someone, they transcribe. And because he went 20 years, he went word by word explanations and details. And also it is because he was also teaching for students at the academic level at university, so language as well as so then he's going word by word, and so therefore is much more details, where here we can't go so much details. One, we don't have time. One, you will get so bored. One, maybe I don't have all the skills like Geshe has. So yeah. So how it is praised as the view in which appearance and emptiness are seen as mutual companions. So having thus induced certainty through the emptiness that is empty of all referent object for apprehending science. So that is, inherent existence object. One does not abandon one's ascertainment of relation between action and effect, because you understand dependent arisings, and due to that dependent arisings, so therefore you don't refute. While you understand emptiness, at the same time you don't refute the relation between cause and conditions, the cause and effect. And so there is understanding or ascertainment of cause. And so therefore, and because you have understanding of that, that cause and effect, the relation between cause and effect, therefore reliance on discarding non-virtues and adapting virtue to that is highly praised. And therefore, you will try to avoid non-virtuous actions, and you will try to engage in the virtuous actions, because you have, even though you understand emptiness, but at the same time, you understand virtuous actions create happiness and non-virtuous actions create suffering. You see that relationship, and you don't want suffering, and you want happiness, and therefore you will engage into reframing from non-virtues or disregarding non-virtues and engaging or adapting in the virtuous action, because you understand, you don't refute and reject the law of cause and effect, because you understand dependent arising. Even though you have realization of emptiness, and even you have understanding of emptiness, at the same time you have understanding of dependent arisings, and so therefore, so that is where. And then in Nagarjuna's, in the essence of mind of enlightenment, it says relying on action and their effect, while knowing emptiness of phenomena. If you see, sometimes it looks like there are contradictions if you don't really understand. When you really don't understand, the concept of emptiness and the concept of cause and effect, it seems there are contradictions, isn't it? If you just take the term without really understanding the meaning of that, emptiness means nothing. And then, depending on cause conditions, the effect depending on cause condition means there's something. So therefore, it seems contradiction when you don't have correct understanding. But here, when you have correct understanding, then, while you understand the emptiness, while you know the emptiness, still you rely on cause and condition, the actions and its effect. This is more wonderful still than wonderful, So Nagarjuna is praising Lama Buddha Shakyamuni for these presentations of this view, among all the wonderfulness in the world, There's nothing wonderful of these teachings. There are so many wonderful in the world, but nothing more wonderful than these teachings of dependent arising and emptiness, as being meaning of dependent arising as emptiness, and the meaning of emptiness being as dependent arising, that they do not contradict each other, but actually they enhance each other's. These are more marvelous still than marvelous, even though there are so many marvelous, in the world, teachings, experiences, and practice. But among all the practice of dependent arising and emptiness is the more marvelous. Among all the teaching of dependent arising of emptiness as dependent arising, most marvelous. Among all the experience, the experience of realization of emptiness, dependent arising, dependent on emptiness is the most marvelous. So, Nagarjuna and also Lama Tsongkhapa, you can see, is praised to dependent arising in his dead writing. They have very similar experience. They had both very similar experience, like here Nagarjuna saying here, similarly, Lama Tsongkhapa also. And they both, even though they were both Buddhist and they have some kind of, from the early, even though they have kind of respect to the Buddha Shakyamunis and his teachings, but their faith increased immensely. Really unshakable faith arises with them when they had the understanding and realization of this view of emptiness and dependent arising. And their mind were blown up. Their mind were blown up by that. Even though, of course, they were blown up by his teaching on bodhicitta, which, no other teacher has also explained that. But their mind was even more blown out, amazed, and developed incredible, unshakable faith once they have that understanding and realizations. And that is why here Nagarjuna is saying, marvelous of all marvelous, wonder of all wonderness. And Lama Tsongkhapa also, in that praise to, he said, he feels from one point of view, he feels very sad that I have not met you in persons. And because of those incredible teaching, now he experienced, and those experiences were incredible, marvelous, and wonderful. And because they see this is the key to overcome all the afflictive emotions, the very ignorance. So they see the end to the samsara. They see end to all the suffering. They see end to all the cause of samsara and suffering, the delusions, the afflictive emotion, the ignorance, when they have that understanding and realizations. So, yeah. So that is here Nagarjuna and Lama Tsongkhapa also. And if you listen to His Holiness teachings, I think he has also same, same experience. Even though, again, they have very strong connection to the bodhicitta, they are encompassed by the bodhicitta, and they have strong feeling towards the bodhicitta, all of that, but they all, including His Holiness, amazed of those teachings of dependent arising and emptiness. And he always, you can see that from his own teachings, your observations, his feelings is very clear, and so hopefully also for us, as we study, as we reflect, contemplate, meditate, and practice more, as we study, have a little bit of experience of that, or even just a taste of experience of that, maybe our faith to the Buddha and his teachings and his practice increases and become unshakable. Sometime at the moment, our practice, our faith are not unshakable. Sometimes we have started, sometimes we want a lot of things, we have doubt, sometimes it seems like we don't have doubt. It seems like it's clear, but other times we started to have some doubt about many of the teachings, but once we have that, then, all this doubt, all this will be clear as it was with all these great masters. So I think I will kind of conclude here, unless you have any, if anyone has any questions or comments, something we share, please. Otherwise, we'll do the dedications and you can have a good discussions. Okay, so it seems like there's no caution, so we can do the dedications. Due to the merit of these virtuous actions, may I quickly attain the state of Guru Buddha and lead all living beings without exception into that enlightened state. Chanjo sen cho rinpo che ma ke pa na ke kyo che ke wa nyam pa me pa ya kong le kong tu pe wa. We do the long life prayer. Ji de kang de pen de ma lu pa kang la chung we sa be yi she no ka den chung me den zen ja so la so wa de so tu je lun do sho. You who uphold the subject moral way, who serve as a bountiful bearer of all, sustaining, preserving, and spreading Manjunari victorious doctrine, who masterfully accomplish magnificent prayer, honoring the three jewels, severe myself and others, your disciple, please live long. Venerable One, to you whose kindness exists, that of all conqueror for those wanderers in the far places, especially the West, mindful of your loving concern for us and intentionally descending again into a family of far distant land, we make this request. O Lama, please live long. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you. And have a wonderful good evening and sleep and nice dream, Maybe you have maybe even we don't have a realization or emptiness, maybe in the dream, maybe we might be able to have, at least maybe in the dream.
Thanks.